In the deep tapestry of Earth's history, long before humans ever walked across grassy plains or carved their tools from stone, there existed a strange and alien world that often feels more like science fiction than natural history. Among the most bizarre and awe-inspiring aspects of this prehistoric Earth is the age when gigantic mushrooms, some towering nearly 30 feet high, rose up like sentinels across the landscape. These were not mere fungi as we know them today, delicate organisms confined to damp forest floors, but colossal structures that shaped ecosystems in profound ways. To imagine the Earth covered by these towering fungal giants is to step into a world radically different from the one we inhabit now, a world of forgotten prehistoric giants that reigned long before dinosaurs dominated the land. The organism most often associated with this mysterious chapter in Earth's past is Prototaxites, a strange life form that puzzled scientists for generations. Fossil evidence places its existence around 420 to 370 million years ago, during the Silurian and Devonian periods, a time when terrestrial ecosystems were just beginning to flourish. Plants had only recently moved onto land, and the tallest vegetation consisted of simple, non-vascular plants resembling mosses, along with primitive vascular plants that rarely exceeded a few feet in height. Into this humble landscape rose the enigmatic Prototaxites, with some specimens reaching heights of 20 to 30 feet and widths of several feet across. They were the skyscrapers of their era, standing solitary against a largely barren terrain, their immense trunks casting shadows across a primitive landscape that had not yet seen the rise of forests as we know them today. For decades, paleontologists argued over the true identity of Prototaxites. Early interpretations suggested they might have been giant algae or even primitive trees. Their fossilized remains revealed internal structures that could be mistaken for woody tissue, leading some researchers to classify them as early conifer-like plants. Others suspected a relationship to lichens, given the evidence of symbiotic structures. Yet, as more detailed microscopic analyses were carried out in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, evidence mounted in favor of their fungal nature. The complex weave of tubular filaments, consistent with fungal hyphae, indicated that these colossal pillars were, in fact, fungi, making them the largest organisms on land at the time by a vast margin. The idea of a 30-foot mushroom dominating the landscape might sound fantastical, but it is supported by both fossil records and geochemical evidence. These organisms would have stood as monumental structures amid low vegetation, their towering presence altering wind patterns, soil chemistry, and even the way early plants grew around them. In many respects, they functioned as ecosystem engineers, creating microhabitats for smaller organisms. Their massive size likely gave them a competitive advantage in capturing nutrients from the environment, whether by breaking down organic matter or forming symbiotic relationships with other lifeforms. The mechanisms by which they grew so large remain a subject of speculation, but their role in shaping the planet's early terrestrial environment is undeniable. One of the most fascinating aspects of this era is that Earth's atmosphere was dramatically different from today's. Oxygen levels fluctuated, and carbon dioxide concentrations were much higher. The Devonian period, in particular, saw conditions that were favorable for fungal growth, as fungi are highly efficient at decomposing organic matter and recycling nutrients. The absence of complex herbivores on land also meant that these towering fungi faced little threat of being grazed or destroyed, allowing them to dominate without the evolutionary pressures that later constrained plant and fungal forms. Without insects, mammals, or even the large reptiles that would come much later, Prototaxites reigned unchallenged as the terrestrial giants of their time. Imagining Earth during this period requires stripping away familiar images of forests filled with birdsong, grassy meadows, or towering oaks. Instead, picture vast expanses of moss-like vegetation spread low across the ground, with scattered primitive plants rising only a few feet high. Amid this carpet of green, monumental fungal columns, some as thick as a human's torso and several times taller than any surrounding plant, would have dominated the horizon. From a distance, they might have appeared like a forest of tree trunks, yet upon closer inspection, their surfaces were more akin to fungal tissue, spongy and fibrous rather than woody. Rainwater would have cascaded down their surfaces, and the decomposing remains of other organisms may have collected at their bases, enriching the soil with nutrients and fostering the growth of smaller life forms. The presence of these fungal giants also raises questions about their life cycle and reproduction. Fungi reproduce through spores, and if prototaxites followed this pattern, then their spore dispersal would have been on a scale unimaginable for modern mushrooms. Billions upon billions of spores could have drifted across ancient landscapes, carried by winds that swept over barren terrains. These spores may have seeded new growth across vast distances, giving rise to scattered colonies of colossal fungi that punctuated the landscape like alien monuments. Such spore clouds may even have influenced the atmosphere itself, altering humidity levels and participating in early cycles of organic carbon exchange. Over time, however, the reign of the 30-foot mushrooms came to an end. By the late Devonian period, vascular plants were evolving rapidly, giving rise to the first true forests. Tree-like plants such as Archaeopteris, with woody stems and leafy branches, began to dominate the landscape. These plants not only grew tall enough to rival the giant fungi but also had extensive root systems that stabilized soils and reshaped ecosystems. With the rise of forests, the dominance of fungi like prototaxites diminished, their ecological niche eroded by competition. The towering mushrooms gradually disappeared from the fossil record, leaving behind only their petrified remains as evidence of their once grand reign. The story of these forgotten prehistoric giants serves as a reminder of the strange and ever-changing nature of life on Earth. The idea that fungi, often overlooked in modern ecosystems, once dominated the land as the tallest and most imposing organisms highlights the dynamic interplay of evolution and environment. It also underscores the importance of fungi as ancient pioneers in the colonization of terrestrial habitats. Even today, fungi remain crucial to ecosystems, breaking down organic matter, forming symbiotic relationships with plants, and influencing soil health. But their brief time as rulers of the land stands out as one of the most bizarre chapters in evolutionary history. Speculating about what it would have been like to walk among these fungal giants sparks the imagination. To stand at the base of a 30-foot mushroom would have been a humbling experience, especially in a world devoid of familiar animals. The silence of the Devonian landscape, broken only by the rustle of primitive plants or the distant splash of early fish in shallow waters, would have lent an eerie stillness to these fungal forests. Their surfaces may have been home to microbial colonies, slimy mats of cyanobacteria, or even tiny arthropods beginning their first forays onto land. Beneath their canopies, conditions may have been darker and moister than the surrounding terrain, creating microclimates where early life forms could thrive. From a scientific perspective, the mystery of prototaxites also challenges us to rethink the boundaries of life and evolution. It reminds us that the line between fungi, plants, and other organisms is not always as distinct as we assume. Evolutionary experiments like these reveal the creativity of natural selection in adapting organisms to unique environmental conditions. That such strange giants could arise and then vanish entirely speaks to the impermanence of ecological dominance, a theme echoed throughout Earth's history by countless species that have risen to prominence only to disappear as conditions shifted. In modern times, interest in these prehistoric fungi has extended beyond paleontology into broader cultural imagination. Artists and science communicators often depict ancient landscapes dotted with giant mushrooms, evoking both wonder and unease. These depictions resonate because they challenge our notions of what is natural on Earth. We are accustomed to thinking of trees as the defining vertical element of terrestrial ecosystems, yet for millions of years it was fungi that occupied this role. To envision a mushroom taller than a house forces us to confront the alien qualities of our own planet's past and appreciate the diversity of evolutionary possibilities. Even in contemporary science, questions linger about how such large fungi could have sustained themselves metabolically. Some researchers suggest that they may have been protrophic, breaking down large amounts of decaying organic matter, while others argue for a symbiotic relationship with early plants or microbes. Isotopic analyses of fossilized remains indicate variations in carbon composition, supporting the idea that prototaxites may have drawn nutrients from multiple sources. This metabolic flexibility could explain their ability to grow to such immense sizes in a landscape with limited resources. Yet, despite decades of study, a complete picture of their biology remains elusive, reminding us that the fossil record often leaves more mysteries than answers. When comparing their role to modern ecosystems, it becomes clear that fungi, though no longer towering 30 feet tall, still exert a quiet but profound influence. They are decomposers, symbionts, and in some cases pathogens, shaping the survival and evolution of countless species. Mycorrhizal fungi, for example, form intricate networks with plant roots, facilitating nutrient exchange that sustains forests worldwide. In a sense, the spirit of the ancient giants lives on in these hidden networks, a reminder of the time when fungi stood not underground or in shadow but as the undisputed monarchs of the land. Ultimately, the tale of Earth's 30-foot mushrooms is a story of forgotten giants, a fleeting era when the familiar rules of life seemed turned upside down. It is a chapter of prehistory that reminds us of the strangeness of evolution, the impermanence of ecological dominance, and the remarkable adaptability of life on this planet. These towering fungi may be gone, their reign ended by the rise of trees and the changing conditions of the Devonian, but their legacy remains etched in stone and in the imagination of those who study Earth's ancient past. To remember them is to expand our understanding of what life can be and to marvel at the endless creativity of nature in shaping the world we know today. 1. Existence of Prototaxites, the mysterious 30-foot mushroom-like organisms. Among the strangest organisms ever to walk across the stage of Earth's history was Prototaxites, an enigmatic life form that continues to fascinate paleontologists today. Fossil evidence of these towering structures reveals that they could reach heights of nearly 30 feet, far surpassing any other land-based organism of their time. Their sheer scale alone makes them stand out in evolutionary history, as fungi in modern times rarely exceed just a few inches. Prototaxites dominated the land at a time when terrestrial ecosystems were still in their infancy, making them the undisputed giants of the prehistoric world. Their cylindrical fossilized remains look much like logs of fallen trees, which for many years confused scientists into thinking they were plants or even early conifers. The fact that they were actually fungi makes them even more bizarre, as the idea of a 30-foot mushroom overturns all expectations of what fungi are capable of. 2. Time frame of their dominance during the Silurian and Devonian periods, 420–370 million years ago. Prototaxites appeared during the Silurian period and thrived well into the Devonian, existing roughly between 420 and 370 million years ago. This was an era when life on Earth was still in the experimental phase of colonizing land. The Silurian saw the first plants establishing themselves beyond the water's edge, while the Devonian is often called the Age of Fishes, due to the explosive diversity of aquatic life. On land, however, ecosystems were primitive compared to what came later. The tallest plants at that time rarely exceeded 3 feet, leaving the landscape relatively flat and open. Against this backdrop, Prototaxites rose like monoliths, towering over everything else. Their dominance lasted tens of millions of years, a significant stretch of time in evolutionary history, and their eventual disappearance coincided with the rapid rise of vascular plants and the formation of the first true forests. 3. Earth's landscape during that time, barren, with only mosses and small plants. The world Prototaxites inhabited would be almost unrecognizable to modern humans. Instead of forests filled with tall trees, flowers, and grasses, the land was largely barren and covered in patches of low moss-like vegetation. Primitive vascular plants such as early ferns and horsetails were beginning to appear, but they lacked the height and complexity of later forests. The terrain itself would have been rocky, often covered in shallow soils, with many areas resembling tundra landscapes or windswept plains. Without roots deep enough to stabilize the ground, erosion was common, and the land was shaped heavily by wind and water. Into this stark environment rose the colossal fungal pillars, breaking the monotony of the horizon. To early terrestrial animals, mostly small arthropods venturing from water, these towering structures would have been the only vertical landmarks, making the landscape look alien, surreal, and eerily quiet compared to the lush diversity we take for granted today. 4. Scientific confusion about what prototaxites really were: fungi, algae, lichens, or trees. For over a century, the identity of prototaxites baffled scientists. When the first fossils were discovered in the mid-19th century, their immense size and tree-like form suggested they were primitive conifers or early gymnosperms. Some researchers argued they were marine algae that had washed ashore, while others believed they were lichens, symbiotic structures formed between fungi and photosynthetic organisms. The difficulty lay in the fact that the internal fossil structures could be interpreted in multiple ways, depending on the assumptions of the researcher. It was not until the late 20th and early 21st centuries, with advanced microscopic and isotopic analyses, that evidence overwhelmingly pointed to a fungal origin. The tubular filaments observed in their tissues resembled fungal hyphae rather than plant cells, and isotopic signatures suggested they did not photosynthesize like plants but instead obtained nutrients from decomposing organic matter. This solved one mystery but opened another: how could a fungus grow so massive? 5. Fossil evidence showing their massive size, up to 30 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Fossils of prototaxites have been discovered in various parts of the world, including Canada, Saudi Arabia, and other regions that once shared similar climates millions of years ago. These fossils typically resemble large logs, sometimes several feet in diameter, preserved in sedimentary rock. When fully reconstructed, some specimens suggest these organisms stood between 20 and 30 feet tall, with a girth of around 3 feet. Such dimensions are extraordinary for fungi, which in the modern world rarely form visible structures taller than a few feet, with the largest mushroom caps measuring mere inches. The scale of prototaxites makes them the undisputed giants of their era, towering over the surrounding mosses and shrubs. Their preservation in the fossil record is remarkable because it captures both their immense size and their unique internal structure, providing scientists with the evidence necessary to piece together one of the strangest evolutionary experiments in Earth's history. 6. Unique internal structure resembling fungal hyphae. Microscopic studies of prototaxites fossils revealed a complex internal pattern of tubes and filaments, closely resembling fungal hyphae. Hyphae are the thread-like structures that make up the body of fungi, spreading out to absorb nutrients and form the larger fruiting bodies we see as mushrooms. The presence of these hyphal structures in prototaxites fossils strongly indicated that they were fungal rather than plant in origin. Interestingly, the arrangement of these filaments suggested a dense and supportive framework that could have allowed the organism to achieve such massive size. The internal tissue was not woody but fibrous and spongy, quite unlike trees, yet strong enough to support vertical growth. Some paleobotanists initially thought these filaments resembled the vascular tissues of plants, hence the early confusion, but advances in microscopy and isotopic chemistry confirmed their fungal nature, rewriting our understanding of early terrestrial ecosystems. 7. Their ecological role as the tallest terrestrial organisms of their era. Prototaxites played a critical ecological role during their reign. As the tallest structures on land, they altered their environment in ways smaller plants could not. They cast shade on surrounding mosses and early vascular plants, creating microhabitats that may have influenced the growth patterns of other organisms. Their decomposition contributed large amounts of organic matter to the soil, helping establish more fertile ground that later plants could exploit. They may also have served as windbreaks, altering airflow across barren plains and influencing how spores and seeds were dispersed. In this sense, they were ecosystem engineers, shaping their environment in profound ways despite not being mobile or predatory. Their towering presence would have been both a shelter and a challenge for early arthropods, which likely lived in their shadow, finding food in the decaying organic matter that accumulated around their bases. 8. Atmospheric conditions of early Earth with high CO and varying oxygen levels. The atmosphere during the Silurian and Devonian periods was vastly different from today. Carbon dioxide levels were significantly higher, while oxygen levels fluctuated. Such an environment was favorable for the growth of fungi, which thrive in carbon-rich conditions. Without forests or grasses to absorb CO and produce oxygen at large scales, the air would have been heavier, denser, and perhaps even toxic to modern animals. The climate was generally warm, and moisture levels varied, creating patches of damp environments where fungi could thrive. These atmospheric conditions likely contributed to the ability of prototaxites to grow so large, as their metabolism may have been suited to breaking down organic matter in such carbon-rich conditions. Moreover, the lack of competition from tall plants or advanced herbivores meant they could exploit their ecological niche without constraint, ruling the land during this unique chapter of Earth's history. 9. Lack of large land animals or herbivores, allowing fungi to grow unchallenged. One of the key reasons prototaxites could rise to such staggering heights without being constantly destroyed was the absence of large land animals. During the Silurian and early Devonian, most animals were still confined to the seas and rivers. The land had only just begun to be colonized by primitive arthropods, such as millipede-like creatures and tiny scorpions. None of these animals were large enough or equipped to consume the massive fungal structures. Unlike later ecosystems, where herbivores place constant pressure on plants and fungi to evolve defenses, prototaxites grew free from such threats. Their towering presence went unchallenged, and their only real competition came from the slowly advancing vascular plants. This lack of grazing allowed them to dominate open landscapes for tens of millions of years, becoming the most striking life form on land. Their survival illustrates how evolutionary opportunity thrives in the absence of competitors or predators. 10. Spore-based reproduction and possible large-scale dispersal across continents. As fungi, prototaxites would have reproduced through spores, though the exact details of their reproductive strategy remain speculative. If they follow the general fungal model, they would have released vast numbers of microscopic spores into the air, carried by wind across primitive landscapes. With their incredible height, they would have had a major advantage in dispersal, sending spores high above the ground to catch atmospheric currents. This may have allowed them to colonize vast territories, popping up like sentinels across ancient continents. Given their global fossil distribution, it is likely they were highly successful at spreading their lineage across large geographic regions. Massive spore clouds drifting over barren landscapes would have been a common sight, potentially altering the local atmosphere and even influencing climate conditions by increasing organic particulates in the air. Such an immense spore output ensured their survival and expansion during their dominance on prehistoric Earth. 11. Contribution to nutrient cycling and soil formation. The role of prototaxites in nutrient cycling cannot be overstated. By breaking down organic matter, they accelerated the process of decomposition and helped create richer soils. At a time when terrestrial ecosystems were still forming, this was vital for the spread of more complex plants. Their immense bodies, when they died, added large amounts of biomass back into the environment, feeding microbial communities and smaller fungi. The constant recycling of nutrients contributed to the stabilization of early soils, enabling vascular plants to take hold and expand across land. In this sense, prototaxites acted as ecological pioneers, preparing the groundwork for the forests that would later cover the Earth. Their ability to dominate barren terrains and enrich them with nutrients highlights the deep interconnection between fungi and plants, a relationship that continues today in the form of mycorrhizal partnerships that sustain nearly every forest on Earth. 12. Possible symbiotic relationships with primitive plants or microbes. Some scientists theorize that prototaxites may not have survived solely as giant decomposers but could have engaged in symbiotic relationships with primitive plants or microbes. Modern fungi form mycorrhizal partnerships with plant roots, exchanging nutrients in ways that are crucial for plant survival. If prototaxites had similar interactions, they may have served as anchors for nutrient exchange in the early terrestrial environment, aiding the growth of surrounding plants while drawing sustenance in return. Another possibility is that they partnered with photosynthetic microbes, similar to how lichens function today. Such a relationship would have allowed them to generate additional energy, supplementing their decomposition-based metabolism. These potential symbioses, though speculative, underscore the adaptability of fungi and their ability to form mutually beneficial relationships. If true, prototaxites may have been early architects of cooperative living systems that shaped ecosystems long before true forests emerged. 13. Competition with evolving vascular plants and the rise of true forests. The dominance of prototaxites eventually faced a serious challenge as vascular plants evolved to greater heights. By the late Devonian, tree-like plants such as Archaeopteris appeared, capable of reaching sizes comparable to prototaxites while also having leaves, branches, and extensive root systems. These plants not only grew tall but also transformed the land by stabilizing soils and forming dense canopies. Their ability to photosynthesize efficiently gave them a massive advantage, and they began to spread rapidly, creating the first true forests. Prototaxites, once unrivaled giants, suddenly had to compete with organisms that could occupy the same vertical space while producing their own energy through sunlight. Over time, the ecological niche of giant fungi shrank, and they disappeared from the fossil record. Their decline highlights how evolutionary shifts in one group can bring the downfall of another, reshaping ecosystems permanently in the process. 14. Decline and eventual extinction of giant fungi as trees spread globally. By the end of the Devonian period, prototaxites were gone, their dominance erased by the spread of vast forests. The rise of large, woody plants permanently altered Earth's landscapes, changing soil composition, stabilizing river systems, and dramatically lowering atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. These forests created shaded environments that giant fungi may not have been able to tolerate, while simultaneously outcompeting them for space and resources. Once their ecological role diminished, the towering fungi vanished from the fossil record, leaving only petrified remnants as evidence of their rule. Their extinction was not due to a sudden catastrophe but rather a slow replacement by plants that had evolved more efficient ways of surviving and thriving on land. In this sense, Prototaxites serves as a symbol of evolutionary transition, once dominant, then forgotten as new life forms rose to prominence and reshaped the balance of power on Earth. 15. Scientific debates and theories that lasted more than a century about their identity. The mystery of prototaxites sparked heated debates among scientists for more than a century. When fossils were first described in the 19th century, their size and shape led some researchers to argue they were primitive conifers, while others suggested they were rolled-up mats of algae. The lack of leaves, roots, or branches made classification difficult, and the unusual internal structure did not match any known organism at the time. For decades, their true nature remained one of paleontology's greatest puzzles. It was not until modern techniques such as stable isotope analysis were applied that the fungal theory gained strong support. These analyses showed that prototaxites did not photosynthesize, ruling out plant or algal origins. The resolution of this mystery highlights how scientific understanding evolves with technology, and how some of the most bizarre fossils can take generations to properly interpret. Even today, some details about their biology remain unresolved. 16. Modern significance of fungi in ecosystems and their evolutionary legacy. Although prototaxites disappeared hundreds of millions of years ago, their legacy endures in the critical role fungi continue to play in ecosystems. Modern fungi, though not towering 30 feet tall, are indispensable as decomposers, recyclers, and partners of plants. Mycorrhizal fungi form vast underground networks, sometimes called the wood wide web, enabling trees to share nutrients and communicate chemically. Without fungi, forests could not thrive, as nutrients would remain locked in dead organic matter. In this sense, prototaxites were forerunners of the vital roles fungi continue to perform today. Their dominance in the Devonian illustrates how fungi have shaped ecosystems since the very beginning of terrestrial life. They remind us that even organisms we now see as humble and small once held positions of immense ecological importance, altering landscapes in ways that made the rise of later plant and animal life possible. 17. Imaginative reconstructions of what Earth looked like covered with giant mushrooms. Visualizing Earth during the reign of prototaxites can feel like stepping into a scene from science fiction. Imagine vast plains of moss-like vegetation, broken only by the occasional fern-like plant or small shrub. Rising above this green carpet are colossal mushroom-like pillars, their spongy surfaces stretching 30 feet into the air. They would have appeared scattered across the horizon, isolated towers surrounded by open land. In the dim light under their shadows, small arthropods might have scurried, finding shelter and food among decaying organic matter. The atmosphere, rich in carbon dioxide, may have made the air feel heavier, creating a strange and alien ambiance. Artists have often depicted this world as eerie and otherworldly, and it is easy to see why. To walk among these giants would have been a humbling and surreal experience, a reminder of just how strange and alien Earth's past truly was. 18. The mystery of how such large fungi could sustain themselves metabolically. One of the enduring questions about prototaxites is how a fungus could grow so tall and wide without collapsing under its own weight or running out of nutrients. Modern fungi rely on extensive underground mycelium networks to gather resources, and prototaxites may have done the same on a far greater scale. Isotopic studies suggest they absorbed nutrients from a wide variety of sources, possibly decomposing different organic materials or drawing from microbial symbionts. Their ability to grow so large may have depended on flexible feeding strategies that allowed them to exploit resources unavailable to other organisms. Structural strength also remains a mystery, as their fibrous tissue somehow managed to support immense vertical growth without wood. This metabolic puzzle makes them one of the strangest experiments in evolution, challenging our understanding of what fungi are capable of and raising questions that science has yet to fully answer. 19. Their symbolic reminder of evolution's strange experiments in shaping life. The existence of 30-foot mushrooms highlights evolution's ability to experiment with unusual and seemingly improbable forms. For tens of millions of years, fungi ruled the land in a way that is difficult to reconcile with the ecosystems we see today. Prototaxites reminds us that the story of life is not linear or predictable but filled with odd detours and strange successes. Just as giant mushrooms once towered over Earth, later periods saw reptiles dominate, then mammals, and now humans. Each of these dominant groups rose not because of inevitability but because of unique environmental conditions that temporarily favored them. The reign of prototaxites serves as a symbol of this impermanence, a fleeting evolutionary experiment that vanished once conditions changed. By studying such forgotten giants, we gain perspective on the fragility and adaptability of life, and how quickly dominance can shift in the grand theater of evolution. 20. Cultural fascination and modern depictions of giant mushrooms in science and art. In modern times, Prototaxites has captured the imagination of scientists, artists, and storytellers alike. The idea of 30-foot mushrooms towering over the land evokes images more fitting for fantasy novels or alien planets than Earth's own past. Paleo artists often depict early landscapes dotted with fungal giants, creating surreal scenes that bridge science and imagination. Their unique story has also been used in documentaries, science writing, and speculative fiction to highlight the strangeness of evolution. Beyond art, their tale resonates because it challenges assumptions about what is normal in nature. We live in an age defined by trees, grasses, and animals, yet not so long ago in geological terms, Earth was ruled by something entirely different. That fungi once stood as kings of the land sparks both wonder and humility, reminding us that the natural world is far stranger and more diverse than our modern experience suggests.